So far in our series we have established that the human race came from another world to this planet and fought the children of the forest for control of their lands. Eventually they formed the pact and created the god on earth, who then united both races. However, when this was not a hereditary position, the son of the god on earth, the Pearl Emperor, set war against the children of the forest and the new chosen one, the Jade Emperor, or Garth Greenhand, who then migrated his people out into the west. And soon enough, the Giants, or the Tourmaline Empire, would also follow by sea. Eventually, a third race of people known as the Onyx Empire would also head out westward and eventually become the founders of the Valyrian culture and the creator of the dragons. And soon enough they would come to find conflict with the settlement of Old Gis. And so if we look at the Ghiscari Wars with the Valyrians, we would see it gives us a timeline of the progression of civilization in the grasslands of Essos, and also shows us the migration of our fourth gemstone emperor, the Topaz Emperor. We know the Valyrians are the ancient enemies of Old Gis, and that as these are both pre-Long Night civilizations, it's possible to infer that these Proto-Valyrians came into conflict with them before the Long Night occurs, and the Maesters have again altered history to cover it up. We see the Wars of Old Gis actually give us a timeline of the evolution of society in the far eastern grasslands of Essos, and so we know that Old Gis existed alongside Yti, Ashai and the Fisher Queens according to history, as well as the forebears of the Sarnor people. So we know that Sarnor has not yet been established, and so of the 5 Ghiscari Wars, we know that the first war does not have any given details. The second war, we know that Sarnor now exists and fights with Valyria against Old Gis. The third war, Sarforios is the battleground, and Sarnori joined the Valyrians against Old Gis. In the fourth war, the Sarnori now fight on both sides due to infighting occurring between rivals. By the fifth war, Valyria destroys Old Gis completely and salts the earth. And so to understand the first war, we find that our next migration occurs from the far east under the Topaz Emperor, the brown-eyed people, who represent the cultures of the patrimony of Harkoon and the Dothraki. And it appears that these are also going to be the forebears of the fire worshippers who make their way to Ashai, as topazes are notably associated with fire. Now, the first of the 3 cities of the patrimony to migrate appears to be Bayasabad, known as the City of Serpents, which is in the south. They travel along the Sand Road and appear to settle in Vase Toloro. There appears to be wars that have been fought over this city, most likely with Old Gis, and Valyria, as we see the buildings were burned, probably by dragonfire, as we know a large dragon skeleton lies nearby in the desert. The city has snake-themed relics, implying that this is indeed at some point Bayasabad culture settled here and likely were invaded by the Gis in the region. Now we know that a nearby ruined city is called Vase Kozar, which is known as the City of Spiders, and likely their rival, as we hear of a legend of ancient peoples, and there is a lost cities of the snake and spider gods who do battle. So the people of this city are notably symbolized with spiders. This will be important as we cross the grasslands, as there is one more relic that is found in Vase Toloro, which ties the spider people to another that we will meet, Fire Opal, which implies the spider people will in fact be the race of people associated with the Opal Emperor. So these people are descendants of the Ghiscari, who flee north after the first war destroys their city. And notably, as it is a fire opal we see here, the topazes were associated with fire. So we are seeing here a combination of the two races taking control of this city. Now we also get mention of a Silk Road linking into the Far East, which is oddly erased on the maps. It's not noted in any way, but the Silk Road notably links us back to spiders as the providers of silk, and the Silk Road leads us to the lands of the far northeast, where there are notably people who are known to be demon hunters, most likely the descendants of the Steel Angel people and the Pearl Emperor who remained in the Far East. And these people would appear to, due to the fallout of not becoming the next Third-Eyed Raven, people who despise the Children of the Forest and magic, and most likely now dragons too, following the ruin of the city which they tried to inhabit. And it is interesting to note that the cities of the Patrimony were designed to be black monolithic basalt fortresses to prevent brigands from attacking them, which implies to us that the Patrimony are possibly the remnant bloodline of the giants who were left behind in the Far East, and the brigands that we see attacking them are most likely these ancient people who migrate down the Silk Road, which passes one of these cities, into the grasslands of Essos. And it is curious as the Maesters tell us that they believe the First Men and the Andals originate in the Essos grasslands. So it seems far more likely then that they are once again corrupting the histories to cover up the true origins of the Andals, as we know the First Men migrated with Garth from the Far East, possibly through this route, and so we have inadvertently revealed via the Maesters that the Andals in a way do originate here in the grasslands, as they are a race of exiles who came from the Far East and now are travelling through these grasslands and will at this point become the Andal race. So we know at this point the Sarnori people come to exist, and we know that the Ifiquevron, or the Children of the Forest, exist to the north, while the Karth people, or Proto-Valyrians, exist to the south. The Sarnori ancestors must come from the west, and we are most likely seeing that they are in fact the hairy men giants we find on the Rhoyne. There is mention at this time of centaurs people also coming from the east, and these appear to be migrants on horseback coming from the second Patrimony city, Cimmeriana. We get mentions of various other peoples in this time who can be pinpointed based on culture. We hear of the Zokora, the Gips, and the Cimmeria. The Zokora are said to be tall and ride chariots, and so are most likely these Proto-Sarnori people. The Cimmeria are said to be the first to work iron and came down the steel road from the third Patrimony city of Kaya Kayanaka. So who are the Gips, our third race? The name itself does appear to be a slight twisting of Gis, and so these are likely the exiled Gis who we find will go on to become the Andals, shedding their original culture. So for the second Ghiscari War, we get the Sarnori, or Zokora as they are currently known, joining the Valyrians against the Ghiscari people. And it appears the Rhoynar giants at this time also managed to reach Ib, as we see the inhabitants of Ib notably are kin to the brindled men of Sephorios, as they are remarkably similar races in physical features and share a common genetic issue. They are sterile, similar to how real-world mules are created by crossbreeding donkeys and horses, and so only in extremely rare circumstances can they actually possess the genetic coding allowing them to continue to breed. Now, the Third War in Sephorios most likely occurs as a response to the old Gis slavers, where we know that they settle on the Isle of Tears, Zamator and Garrosh. It seems likely this was them attempting to capture wyverns for their own attempts at creating dragons in order to oppose the Proto-Valyrian people. A major indicator we get that the Ghiscari were trying to build dragons of their own comes from their site in the Isle of Tears, where we find after the doom of Valyria that Gogossus on the Isle of Tears is retaken by the Ghiscari and is known as a location associated with human-beast mating legends, similar to what we see for the lizard people in the creation of the dragons, which may imply that they indeed were trying to remake dragons here, and the Valyrians took over, and then they attempted again after the doom. However, the colony was devastated by the Red Death Plague, which heavily resembles the same plague which attacks people who invade Naf, who we have shown appear to actually be children of the forest. So it seems likely that, as it is possible the children of the forest most likely indeed caused the doom, they wanted to ensure after that fact that no one else was creating dragons, and so sent the plague. And this would make sense why by the time of the Third Ghiscari War, there is also an explanation why dragon bones are noted to be found as far south as Sephorios and as far north as Ib. There were ancient wars which took place, which featured dragons. Now, the Fourth Ghiscari War would show us that the Sarnori people begin to collapse from the inside from infighting, as rivals within them begin choosing opposite sides in the war, and this is most likely because they have taken in refugees from the old Gis cities that are fleeing north, and so a conflict of ideologies is taking place, as these people obviously still have ties to old Gis, leading to a division of the Sarnori culture. And it is possible here that this is where we get the association of the name Sarnori, as the old Gis people who take over are the Sarnori and they supplant the Soqora people. And we do know that at some point the Sarnori come to be associated with having silk as a material, and silk, as we have seen so far, is associated with spiders, who are associated with these old Gis people fleeing the ruins of their old city. And so another major link that we find in Sarnori culture is the fact that they have great record halls or libraries in one of their city, which is comparable to the maesters of Old Town, who also likewise claim that no races in the Dawn Age had similar record-keeping abilities. And so we find that the maesters very much are lying about this in this case, as this is in actual fact the origin of the maesters' order under the Sarnori people. And so we will find that the Fifth War would see the Valyrians establish themselves properly and end Old Gis completely and salt the earth. This makes me wonder if this is actually how the Red Waste in fact comes to be created, as if you totally devastated a region with dragonfire or even wildfire, it most likely would create this desert region which cannot ever regrow. And so we would see that now these Proto-Valyrians are the dominant society in their region, and so begin to spread out, and we see that much like the giants, they travel by sea and have established colonies in the region of Karth, the peninsula of Valyria, and also settle in Volantis and Lys. Now, the migration of the Proto-Andal race most likely is spurred on by the arrival of two other races coming in from the east, Proto-Dothraki and the Cimmerian ironworkers from Kaya Kayanaka. Now, the patrimony of Harkum seems to be our original culture for the Azor Ahai legend, and they seem to migrate into Valyria, allowing us to see a link between their two cultures that is shared by the Dothraki, who exist on the path in the middle. Kaya Kayanaka is said to be the city of black basalt, bone and iron. They also notably wear rubies and sacrifice their enemies in ways that are not specified, but due to the link to the Dothraki culture and the rubies, it is impossible to infer that they in fact burn them, meaning these people would one day, when they reach Valyria and Volantis, found the Red Priest temples, which seems to make sense as Volantis seems to be the major site of the Red Priests, as it is where they have their largest temple. The culture of the Dothraki appears to have links between the Cimmeria, which revolve around fire, and also shows a link to the god on earth mythology, as the Dothraki practiced ritual burning of their dead, who are said to ascend to the stars after their death, much like the god on earth did. And we see that there is also a link to the Dragon Lord's mythos here, as they burn the horse with the dead so that they might rise as a fiery steed, similar to how dragons may actually be bonded to the rider by burning them with a sacrifice. The fiery steed also makes us think of dragons. Funnily enough, the fiery red comet seen in the sky is interpreted by them as a fiery horse galloping across the heavens. We would see that it is possible that these same people are the ones who leave Valyria in the Great Schisms to found Qohor. We see that there are similarities to them to even further back cultures of the East, such as Nefer, as both cities are notably known for blood magic and necromancy, explaining of why Neferion is one of the forms of Azor Ahai. The fact that they end up in Qohor and are from the city of bone and iron makes me believe that they are the ones who create Valyrian steel, with the secret ingredient actually being bones, similar to the Viking practice where they believed the spirits of their ancestors would strengthen the blade, which inadvertently worked, as the bones created carbon nanotubes during the smelting and were therefore far stronger than contemporary swords. And so it may be that the Red Priest's legends of the Red Sword of Heroes comes from this first forging of Valyrian steel, which is reflected in the sword myth of Azor Ahai, which coincides with the arrival of the Red Comet as seen in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is viewed as a burning sword in the sky. I believe that just like here, the comet is merely a harbinger of a greater cataclysm that will come later. Now, admittedly, there is little evidence of the topaz migration making it into Westeros, but as we know, there is still a land bridge at this time across the Narrow Sea, and the ancestors of the Dothraki did have the means to enter Westeros without sea travel at this point. As we know, they consider the sea to be poison and avoid it if possible. And we also get two houses slap in the middle of Westeros that may imply horse lords did indeed travel to Westeros, as we see House Caswell have a centaur as a sigil, and the Proto-Dothraki were considered to be centaur men. And we also see House Bracken, who are a house with horses for their sigil, and also have been involved in attempts to poison a weirwood to kill it. Which leads me to a rather interesting video put forward by Crowfoot's daughter of the Disputed Lands, in which she notes that the poison and blackwood tree association is actually extremely strong. Now we know that ironwood is a variant of the black tree, and it invokes iron, which is notable in real world mythologies to be poisonous to supernatural beings like fairies, which the Children of the Forest are very much based on. And we also see references to things such as the Shade of the Evening being considered potentially poisoned when given to Victarion, and also that the Brackens poisoned the Blackwood's weirwood tree. The most interesting one we get of this is House Ironwood has notably been associated with poisoning by Oberyn Martell, who appears to use an oily black poison on his spear, which he uses against the mountain. And so I believe then that the forging of Valyrian steel potentially involves the black wood in some way, which means the nightwoods likely are found in Qohor. Now another interesting fact that we get is that the sigil of the keepers of the ironwood in the north, the foresters, also shows us a tree with a sword within it. And so it seems that the ironwood is connected with the sword's creation in some way. Notably, the only people in the known world at the time of A Song of Ice and Fire who are able to reforge Valyrian steel, as the original creation process has been lost since the Doom of Valyria, happens to be people from Qohor, and notably Topo Mott of King's Landing trained there, and his forge has black and white doors featuring the two mixed grain woods. So there definitely is some connection between the woods and the forging of Valyrian steel. And so if the iron wood used to make swords is indeed full of iron, as the name implies, which is therefore what is used to purge the supernatural elements from the weirwood to create a black tree, iron notably is very good at conducting lightning. As I previously mentioned, I believe the black tree's creation involves lightning strikes. However, there is one other material we know of in this world which is heavily filled with iron: dragon bone. And as we know, the people who create the Valyrian steel come from a city where they are associated with bones and iron. So perhaps then the reason that Valyrian steel can no longer be created from scratch is because the secret ingredient for creating Valyrian steel is dragon bone, which would explain why Azor Ahai's sword is called a dragon blade rather than a Valyrian steel blade. And this would explain why dragon bones are notably found in many of the locations that we would associate with the oily black wood or stone. So there definitely is a connection here between these materials. And this might explain why the Children of the Forest went to such lengths to cause the doom of Valyria. They wanted rid of the dragons because it is the dragons who are the key to their downfall. The dragon's fire can burn them, and their bones can create weapons which can be used against them. And interestingly enough, we get other references to fire magic having connections to bones, as there are implications that bones are actually important to the process of creating glamours, as noted by Melisandre. And so in the next part, we will look at the migrations and invasions of these proto-Andal people as they make their way to Westeros, and their conflicts with the rising power that is the Dragon Lords, as the Andals are our next Gemstone Emperor race, the Opal Emperor.